As soon as they landed, Mimi started trembling in fear, still wondering what exactly they were. Christina, who seemed to be observing closely, speculated that they might be combat robots, and it appeared their target was them. Without hesitation, Elma and Hiro took action first to ensure everyone's safety. Armed with high-tech laser guns, they took down nearly half of the robots instantly. That's when Elma entered the scene, and the situation was finally under control. Luckily, the laser guns worked on them. It was a relief that Elma and Hiro acted swiftly before the robots could make a move, giving them a slight advantage. To understand more about what was happening, Elma and Hiro asked May if the fireballs they saw earlier were related to these robots. Based on the data, it seemed to be confirmed. The island's defense forces were engaged in combat with them. The laser guns were effective, but the robots' armor could withstand several direct hits. To ensure they had enough energy to take down more robots, Hiro asked Elma how many energy packs they had left. After checking, Elma confirmed she had 2 packs, and Hiro had 4. So, Hiro decided to give Elma 1 pack right then. However, Elma quickly refused, saying that, even though it was hard to admit, she knew very well that Hiro was the best marksman in the group. It made more sense for him to keep it. After agreeing, the group moved forward. Judging by the surroundings, it seemed unlikely they'd reach Krishna in this situation. The island's defense system was active, but the enemy force was overwhelming. Even more surprising, the defense systems here were quite unique. From a gorilla, a coconut, to a crab. These were all advanced defensive robots unlike anything on the planet. However, the enemy also had powerful combat robots, creating a stalemate that left the situation unresolved. This made Mimi worry about Krishna, but Hiro reassured the group that there was no need to worry too much. Krishna was probably fine since he had activated the shield remotely earlier. Still, Hiro advised that the group should check on him as soon as possible. That's why they needed to help their ally in defeating these monsters, despite their worries and excitement. Hiro steeled himself to face the robots head-on. After taking a deep breath, he quickly aimed his laser gun at an enemy. Thankfully, even though it wasn't easy, he managed to take it down. After the fight, Mimi rushed over to Hiro to check if he was okay. Recently, Hiro had noticed that whenever he held his breath, everything seemed to slow down. Though he didn't understand why, Hiro decided to push the thought aside for now. There was still a lot to do. After battling the previous robot, Hiro discovered its weak point was in the arm with the laser gun. He quickly relayed this information to Elma. Elma took note and used the info effectively while their allies continued to provide support. Both Elma and Hiro pushed themselves to ensure victory, no matter how tough things got. After a long and exhausting battle, they finally made it back to Krishna. However, the question now was what to do next, as Krishna was the safest place for them at the moment. According to Hiro, keeping watch while the defense system held off the enemy might be a viable plan. However, the situation outside remained grim. According to May's analysis, several small pirate ships were landing, and a large ship was bombarding the orbit, targeting multiple objectives. The island would soon become a bombing target as well. May suggested they send a distress signal to the Empire to report the situation, but it seemed they received no response. This likely meant that their communication system had been jammed. As a result, staying here was no longer a safe option. Faced with this, Hiro was forced to make the decision to leave immediately. As they took off, Hiro instructed the team to check the entire system to ensure there were no issues as they moved forward. As the number of enemies scattered around was massive. During this time, Mimi felt confused, unsure of what they should be most cautious of, even though it was clear there were many serious concerns. Hiro believed the most important thing now was to focus on finding and dealing with the smaller ships while taking down those chasing them. However, before they could begin, Elma asked if Hiro had any experience fighting under these gravity conditions. Though Hiro had no experience, he figured the pirates were likely even more inexperienced, so they would have to rely on this advantage. With multiple fast-approaching threats, the team wasted no time and adjusted their trajectory to counter them. The pirates, unsuspecting of an ambush, found themselves at a disadvantage and would likely be shot down in the current situation. Mimi suggested they begin attacking from orbit, as predicting the enemy's trajectory made it easier to dodge, though these deceptive strikes still caused some trouble. The pirate ships landing from afar were slowly converging, indicating they were preparing for a serious assault. Now, the team had to choose their targets wisely, though they didn't expect to gain much from any option. What stood out was that the pirates remained calm, but it seemed they were also launching a counterattack from behind with secret missiles closing in. As the group attempted to break through the clouds, Hiro directed Elma to activate flares to create interference. Explosions erupted all around, making the atmosphere increasingly chaotic and noisy. The group wondered if they would be able to hit the pirates as they had anticipated. As the clouds began to clear, they realized the pirates were surprisingly skilled. However, Hiro and his team weren't following aerodynamic principles, and their movement felt more like flying through space. More importantly, the pirate ship that had escaped seemed to be hiding in the clouds. No worries though, they could still track it with infrared. Without wasting time, Hiro immediately ordered the team to pursue. But just before they could catch it, the ship was shot down by an ally with a kinetic bullet. Hiro was frustrated. The prize he'd hoped for had slipped away. Elma started wondering if the enemy had lost their composure, unable to cooperate and control their team, not expecting a counterattack. Either way, this was their chance to act. Before it was too late, Hiro urged the team to clear the area before the allies caused friendly fire, and took all the rewards. Unfortunately, it seemed they'd already wiped out most of the enemies in the area. But Mimi questioned, weren't they still dealing with the ones bombing them? Though Hiro wanted to strike, even Krishna's weapons couldn't reach the enemy. Plus, they needed a stable route through the gravity zone, and any mistake could mean getting shot down. As the team debated their next move, a massive explosion suddenly rocked the area, catching even Hiro off guard. Upon checking, they discovered it was an airstrike from resource mining weapons. Proof those devices weren't just for transporting goods. Though enemy forces were in orbit, there was no need to worry. Thanks to their success in jamming communications, an Imperial fleet was on its way, based on reports May had received. Hearing this, Hiro felt a surge of excitement. It meant they could easily wipe out the weaklings and claim the rewards. However, before they could act, the fleet ordered them to let the fleet handle the rest. Just as Hiro thought everything was going smoothly, a ballistic object suddenly appeared in orbit, and the enemy's response began to fade away. It turned out to be a smart warhead airstrike, controlled by the weapon systems. Miro was the one guiding the trajectory and setting the direct impact point, simply demonstrating the incredible capabilities of these devices. As the team moved closer, the Imperial anti-pirate fleet tried to contact them via wide-signal transmission device, demanding they cease all hostilities immediately in the name of the Emperor. They were reminded that any further violent actions would not be forgiven. Though they felt a bit disappointed by not being able to claim as many rewards as they'd hoped, they at least felt relieved that the space fleet had arrived in time. Speaking of the fleet, aboard the fleet ship, Serena looked pale and exhausted. But instead of heading back to the city for medical attention, she decided to stay on the mission, seeing it as a valuable opportunity. Plus, with the new assignment, she knew she had to perform well. With the fleet now in control of the operation, Hiro and his team decided to take a break, stopping at a place that looked like a beach. Mimi was thrilled, watching the meteor shower in the sky. Though it was undeniably beautiful, Hiro couldn't care less, knowing those were just pirate ship fragments. Elma agreed, they were just dirty meteors. Mimi couldn't hide her disappointment at their comments, saying they should at least try to be romantic for once, even if just once. But aside from the dirty meteor shower, Miro's airstrike with the weapon systems had wiped out the pirates in the anti-pirate fleet, delivering a fatal blow to their enemies. Miro and the Imperial army were handling the aftermath, while Hiro and his team waited. Stuck in their position, Elma wondered if Hiro planned to contact Serena. At first, Hiro hadn't intended to, but when Elma brought it up, he realized it would be safer to reach out to her. Besides, he thought it was time for Christina to send a message to her grandfather, who might have already started mobilizing to rescue her. But at the same time, that meant her uncle was probably in a desperate situation. Now, Hiro wondered what someone like her uncle would do next. Elma joked that Chris's uncle might generously admit his guilt and surrender, but since that was far from the truth, the group guessed he would probably throw everything into a stronger pursuit of Chris. With that, Mimi suggested they contact Serena right away, as she owed Hiro enough to keep herself safe. Speaking of Serena, it seemed Christina was the only one who didn't know who she was, so the three of them began explaining. Some of their remarks were a bit snarky, but it was clear Elma had somehow grasped their point of view. However, when Hiro mentioned Serena was the daughter of a Count Halls, Christina started to remember something. Based on what she knew, the Halls family was well known, producing many officials in the military cabinet and generals over generations. After Christina mentioned this, Hiro asked her if nobles usually relied on the military for help. But before Christina could answer fully, Elma interrupted, saying Christina didn't need to worry about that anymore. They could just temporarily use Hiro's connections. It turned out that Elma had built up some frustration with Serena constantly taking advantage of them, and she thought it would be better if things changed, at least once. Hearing this, Hiro realized that Elma was probably planning to pin all the blame on Serena if anything went wrong. With that, it was clear. It was time to contact Serena. Before doing so, Hiro informed Miro that their vacation would end today, and they would be leaving the planet. He also mentioned that they couldn't really call it a vacation anymore, as they had found a valuable connection they could use at the right moment. Although Miro felt disappointed by the news, he understood there was no other choice. While Hiro and the girls prepared to leave, Miro reassured them he would handle the departure procedures. But before he forgot, he asked Hiro if he had bought Mei, the maid robot, since Mimi didn't want to leave Mei behind, and Elma believed her specs could bring a lot of peace of mind to the team. In the end, Hiro decided to buy Mei, even though it felt a bit much, but having her around would be a huge help. He also realized that both Mimi and Elma were on board with the decision, which was the only thing that really mattered to him. Once the decision was made official, the team boarded their ship and began their journey. Meanwhile, aboard the fleet's ship, Serena's assistant seemed increasingly worried, as she appeared to have a severe cold. Serena found this odd, since the medical checkup hadn't revealed anything unusual. Despite feeling unwell, Serena's subordinates informed her that they were receiving a signal from a ship leaving Sierra 3, but they couldn't identify it. Serena was surprised to discover it was Hiro and his team. When they were allowed aboard to speak with Serena, Hiro did his best to be as polite as possible. But Serena waved it off, saying there was no need for such formalities. When the meeting began, it was clear there was still tension between the two. Serena started talking about Hiro's chaotic vacation, and Hiro immediately countered, saying the military had been a little slow, forcing him to make some money off the situation. He also mentioned their wonderful week-long vacation, which made it sound like he was bragging. Serena quickly cut him off, warning him to stop, or there'd be trouble. But as the conversation turned more serious, Hiro asked her if she noticed anything strange about the space pirates. Something that felt off to him. Serena agreed, asking him to explain further. Since Hiro had noted everything down on his tablet, he simply handed it to her. After skimming through it, Serena found it odd that the space pirates had stealth landing ships, equipment usually reserved for the military. This made her wonder how Balthazar managed to get his hands on them. Since Hiro also needed someone to cover for him, he decided to negotiate with Serena. At first she hesitated. But when Hiro reminded her that she still owed him, she eventually agreed to hire him as a bodyguard for the supply convoy. Later that day, as everyone was winding down after a long, tiring day, Hiro was in his room when he heard a knock at the door late at night. Immediately, he wondered who it could be. When he opened the door, he was surprised to find Christina standing there, seemingly with a question on her mind. After they sat down, Hiro immediately asked her if she was tired. After everything that had happened, Hiro felt that fighting against gravity like that must have been tough on Christina. However, it was undeniable that Christina felt everything was worth it, because for her, being with the three was always fun and a little amusing. Before Christina could get too excited and energetic about it, Hiro informed her that it wasn't always going to be so tense. He also expressed regret that their vacation had been cut short. As the conversation continued, it seemed Hiro finally started wondering what was really important to Christina. Feeling like he was beginning to understand, Hiro gestured for Christina to sit next to him on the bed. A bit embarrassed, Christina complied. Though it was hard to say, Christina gradually gathered the courage to ask Hiro if he liked tall feminine girls with big breasts, like Mei. Upon hearing this question, Hiro realized he had been right from the start. Without hesitation, he told Christina that although he was glad she liked him, he wanted to make it clear that he had no intention of approaching her in that way. He was a mercenary, and he couldn't act like that with a client, someone he was supposed to protect. Moreover, he was trying to do right by her grandfather, and that was a matter of trust. He didn't say he didn't understand the interest of girls her age, but he felt she should wait until she was older. Hiro continued to think Christina didn't need to rush, but before he could finish his sentence, Christina quickly responded in a way that took him by surprise. She jumped into his arms, pushing him down onto the bed, and began sweetly saying she could only be with him like this until her grandfather came to take her away. Hiro slowly began to realize that this might actually be true. When everything with her uncle was over, Christina would be the sole heir to the Darenwald family. Though Hiro didn't know much about nobility in this world, he could only assume that Christina would have to marry someone of appropriate status, someone her family would arrange for her. This meant that, no matter how much Christina grew, a mercenary like him would never have a chance. Hiro started to wonder whether he should accept this reality, but before he could come to a decision, Christina had fallen asleep in his arms. As he looked at her peacefully sleeping, Hiro decided that, since this was all he could do for now, he would honor the wish of this little princess for the short time they had left together. The next morning, when Christina woke up, she immediately became embarrassed upon realizing she was tightly hugging Hiro. The entire room grew tense from her discomfort. Hiro tried to ease the tension by greeting her with a simple, "Good morning," and she responded in kind. As they stepped out of the room to prepare for breakfast, Elma immediately greeted them with a skeptical look, curious about what the two of them had been up to the previous night. Hiro quickly spoke up, appearing worried, saying he could explain everything, but before he could say anything, it seemed Elma already knew. She was disappointed that Hiro hadn't kept his promise, not to do anything with Christina. Hiro tried to ask Christina for help, hoping they could clear things up. But instead of helping, Christina blushed as she thought about what had happened the night before, making the misunderstanding even worse. However, contrary to what everyone might have assumed, it turned out that Hiro and Christina had simply slept next to each other that night. Although Elma didn't believe Hiro's words, once Christina agreed with his story, she eventually relented and trusted them. However, Elma reminded them that they needed to maintain their dignity next time, as Christina's actions could affect many people. And she needed to remember that she was of noble blood. Though the situation had grown more serious, Christina appeared quite embarrassed about what had happened. Mimi stepped in to diffuse the tense atmosphere, assuring Elma that they should let it go until both of them had learned their lesson. But when Mimi spoke, Elma suddenly realized she should have slept with Christina the previous night, which made her wonder whether Mimi had played a part in what happened. Though the discussion didn't end easily, eventually everyone returned to their own tasks. By the end of the day, after a tense morning, Hiro and the team began their work. As Hiro sat down at the main control seat, he felt reassured knowing Krishna was doing well and things were gradually stabilizing after the pirate battle the day before. He was also pleased that they were performing well on the mission Serena had given them, even though it didn't seem like a particularly glamorous job. Currently, they were tasked with guarding the civilian cargo ship Pelican 4, a ship owned by the Halls family and also a property of Serena. This meant if the ship was attacked, Serena's fleet would be there in 2 or 3 minutes. If pirates attacked, the ship would be protected by a mercenary vessel, or military ships would come and disperse the attackers. All in all, this was a live bait mission for space pirates. Hiro was just happy they were applying what he had taught. This job was fairly easy, unless they caught a big fish. But there was also Christina's uncle, so Elma and Hiro had to take turns standing guard since they couldn't afford to lose this job right now. While Hiro was working, May brought him some drinks. Seeing how hard-working and capable May was, Hiro started to feel guilty that they hadn't been able to upgrade her yet due to their limited budget. However, it seemed May was perfectly fine with that and reassured Hiro that he didn't need to worry too much about it. To May, the safety of everyone on the ship was the most important thing, and although she couldn't fight or perform complex calculations, she was deeply grateful for the opportunity to serve, especially Hiro, with the body she had. Hearing this, Hiro was genuinely amazed. Though May was just a robot, she acted, thought, and spoke like a grown human. So, Hiro reminded her that if she ever had any requests when being upgraded, she could always let him know. If there was anything she wanted to change from her original configuration, they could always figure out a way to make it happen. Once everything was settled, Hiro continued to check around. Based on the data, it seemed like nothing significant would happen the next day, especially with the pirates in this area having suffered heavy losses the day before. According to reports, around 200 of their ships had been destroyed, which meant that Sierra 3's defense system and Serena's fleet were truly impressive. As Hiro mentioned Serena, May quickly asked when he and an Empire officer had become so close, as she hadn't expected him to have a relationship with her. Immediately, Hiro replied that it wasn't exactly a relationship, but just a joke fate had played on him. However, that didn't seem to be the only thing May was curious about. In addition to his connection with Serena, it appeared that neither the ship nor Hiro himself existed in her database, which made May even more curious about who Hiro truly was. Hearing this, Hiro felt a bit anxious, but he couldn't deny that this situation felt somewhat natural to him. Still, it might have been worse for a mechanical intelligence like May, since he felt unable to explain everything thoroughly. Hiro wondered if he should tell May the truth, but before he could decide, May reassured him that his secret would be safe with her. Though Hiro still felt that telling her might be risky, he knew that for May to reach her full potential, the information they shared had to be as accurate as possible. Finally, Hiro decided to explain everything to her, saying that from his perspective, it was all just a game he had played before. To make things even more complicated, it wasn't exactly the same. May speculated that all of this could just be a simulation, and they could assume this universe was created by a powerful supercomputer, with everyone in this natural phenomenon being virtual images created by someone. Though the theory sounded unsettling, it actually aligned with many aspects of their current situation. But for Hiro, An imagined universe didn't quite feel right, especially since the technology in his world was far behind what May described. There were no computers like that here, as it was beyond even the most advanced supercomputers. But if they were truly dealing with a simulation, as May suggested, maybe the opposite was true. This was reality, and Hiro's world was an artificial universe created somewhere within this reality. So if he was given form and emerged from that world, why didn't he know anything about it? Still, in any case, they wouldn't know anything unless they figured out how to prove the theory. Honestly, Hiro felt it was a waste of time thinking about his origins. So he stopped dwelling on his past, trying to convince May not to dig into it any further. It seemed his plan worked, as after a while, May respected his decision and stopped probing. The next day, Serena seemed to be getting frustrated, since it had been 3 days since Hiro and his team took on the escort mission, but no pirates had shown up. She blamed Hiro for this. Serena didn't even consider that her warship could be the problem, even though pirate ships could detect its presence. Confidently, Serena insisted it was impossible, since she had changed the ship's ID the day before. However, Elma found this absurd, as nonchalantly as Serena said it. A ship's ID was unique. No two ships had the same one, and it clearly couldn't be changed so easily. Yet, rather than accepting that the issue might be on their end, Serena refused to admit it. It turned out she was simply bored, because with no pirates to catch, it only meant more work for her. So, she had been stuck in the captain's office all this time, hoping at least Hiro would help her escape this situation so she could breathe a little easier. Hearing this, she seemed like a lonely person. As Serena skimmed through the reports on pirate activity across the Sierra star system, she discovered that incidents had dropped significantly since the large-scale attack. Just as they were beginning to think the day would pass peacefully, like all the days before, the restricted alarm bell of the transport ship rang, announcing that the pirates had finally arrived after 3 days. Immediately, everyone began moving to their positions and getting to work. With Hiro taking the lead, the team switched the radar mode to close range, and Hiro was contacted by Pelican 4. Hiro quickly assessed that the enemy would likely attack as soon as they re-entered normal space. So he left the defense system to Elma. While checking Pelican 4, Hiro noticed that the rest of the crew had no idea about the situation with the blockade ship, and they felt it would be difficult to escape the enemy with their own ship. For this reason, Hiro quickly reminded them not to resist too fiercely and to stop using the warp engines, as doing so would make it easier for him and his team to calculate the counterattack timing. So, for now, he instructed Pelican 4 to focus on defense as they entered normal space, as much as possible. Although Pelican 4 was a civilian ship, its crew was made up of Empire soldiers, so Hiro was confident they could at least fend for themselves. And even if the ship was destroyed, they still had the Empire's strength, armor, and heavy weaponry to fall back on. As Pelican 4 began to decelerate, Mimi suddenly realized there were a total of 11 enemy ships. Among them, 1 was a battleship and 2 were cruisers. It seemed like they had something planned, but it wasn't just a simple pirate raid. Hiro wondered if they had run into a large pirate fleet, but the bigger question was how these enemies had managed to detect them. With such a large enemy force, if they didn't accelerate immediately, they'd be in serious trouble. So, to make the most of this opportunity, Hiro ordered everyone to accelerate as soon as they entered normal space. And the crew followed his orders without hesitation. However, it seemed the pirates were showing no mercy this time. In addition to their overwhelming numbers, they were quick to open fire without warning. But that wasn't the most shocking part. As they got a closer look at the ships, they were stunned to realize that these were old Empire military models. At this point, it was easy to conclude that the Empire's military had been rather careless in managing its equipment, and the enemies weren't even trying to hide their true identity. This made it clear that the attackers weren't just space pirates, they were part of Balthazar's forces, and their target was Christina. Before they could fully process what was happening, the enemy battleship's main cannon opened fire on them, and Hiro knew that even Krishna's shields wouldn't hold up against this. It was an Imperial fleet they were facing. Elma eagerly asked Hiro what their plan was now. It seemed Hiro was pumped up, and he decided to attack without hesitation. Under the heavy bombardment, everyone aboard the ship braced for a potential collision. While others feared for their lives, Hiro stayed focused, thinking that keeping a distance from a large enemy was a foolish idea. For Hiro, the farther they were, the easier they became targets for the enemy's powerful lasers. Even though the Krishna's shields were strong, they couldn't block large laser blasts forever. They needed to get closer, close enough to prevent the enemy battleship from using its main cannon. Then, Hiro planned to strike with anti-ship torpedoes. After some maneuvering, they successfully got into the enemy battleship's blind spot. However, instead of attacking immediately, Hiro decided to wait. This warship wasn't the only enemy they had to deal with. Even though it was a large battleship, they had to consider the guns of the other ships as well. If they focused solely on the battleship's blind spot, the other ships wouldn't be able to fire their main cannons, and the entire enemy escort fleet would be unable to shoot for fear of hitting their own ship. Hiro planned to use his own ship as a hostage. Because fighting against a fleet of warships was incredibly difficult. They needed to think outside the box, as much as possible. When the smaller ships began circling them, just as expected, Hiro moved to the next step. For Krishna and Hiro, this kind of enemy was easier to handle. And to make things even more dramatic, it seemed the enemy ships were using the same frequency as Krishna. This meant they were just ordinary soldiers of the Empire. Not only was their equipment poorly managed, but they were genuine Empire soldiers. There were many possible reasons for this. One explanation was that Christina's grandfather might have bribed them. Now, Serena's fleet had entered the scene. Using the communication frequency, Serena warned the Imperial warships engaged in the battle that their actions were suspected to be a serious violation of military law. If they didn't stop and power down their engines, they would face ruthless legal punishment. However, despite the warning, none of the ships showed any sign of stopping or obeying Serena's orders. So, Serena reminded them once more that their actions were a grave breach of imperial and military law. If they refused to comply, Serena's fleet would be forced to destroy them. Despite Serena's repeated warnings, the enemy clearly wasn't concerned with the transport ship. Their real target was Christina. Although Christina didn't know what methods her uncle used to draw them into this conflict, it was clear they couldn't back down now. The enemy was willing to damage their own ship and open fire with all their weapons, showing they had no hesitation in attacking their own allies. As heat signatures were detected, including from cruisers and destroyers, the battle intensified. Serena ordered her fleet to label the enemy as a rogue fleet and told Hiro to retreat immediately. As they began to withdraw, the enemy fired a laser at them, but luckily Krishna dodged it with ease. As the captain, Hiro tried to stay calm, reassuring the crew and hoping to prevent any panic, even though the situation was rapidly spiraling out of control. Still, Hiro kept assuring everyone that everything was fine and going according to plan. Meanwhile, Serena's assault became fiercer, and they needed to leave the area before facing a direct strike. Fortunately, they managed to escape just in time. According to Elma's analysis, only one enemy ship remained operational. But the real question was it safe to hide with that ship still active? Hiro quickly stated that there was no need to put themselves in danger in this situation. Serena was there, and she could handle it herself. But would this battle end? And who would be the victor? As the enemy ships began to comply, Vester's engines slowly powered down. The ship's first officer, Lieutenant Roman Kestrel, contacted Serena directly. As the first officer, Serena wondered what had happened to their captain. According to Lieutenant Roman, the captain had injured himself, and Roman had taken command. After hearing this, Serena announced that they would begin rescuing the survivors, so the ship needed to prepare to receive them. Meanwhile, Hiro and his team found this information rather suspicious. However, since the situation had calmed, they concluded that the battle might be over. Once everything settled on Serena's side, they would return to Pelican 4. Mimi then checked on Christina, who seemed much calmer than before. Still, she honestly admitted how worried she had been earlier. Hiro hoped this was truly the case. When the battle finally ended, Hiro and his team took the insurgents to the Sierra Prime colony. The independent space pirate hunting team had paperwork and resupply duties to handle, so they were freed from their mission. As for the reward, with no space pirates to deal with, Hiro and his team didn't get much. But they still managed to earn around 240,000 NL for 3 days of work with no extra compensation. They also realized Christina's grandfather could contact them at any time, so they decided to stay at the Sierra Prime colony. Hiro thought this might be the perfect time to upgrade May. For that reason, Hiro and May were on their way to the Orient Industry branch office. As soon as they arrived, Hiro began to feel an unusual sense of unease. Based on the story of the origin of mechanical intelligence Hiro had heard from Miro, androids could consider this place their starting point, making it the home for robots like May. However, the more Hiro looked at the people around him, the more unsettling the place seemed. Noticing Hiro's anxious expression, May asked if he was okay. Immediately, Hiro reassured her, saying there was no need to worry. He kept things to himself. After a while of walking, they reached the end of the area, where a large building greeted them. It turned out to be Orient Industry, the largest manufacturer in the Sierra Star system. And they were about to step inside. A girl greeted them warmly, and even at the reception desk, the receptionist was an android. What surprised Hiro was that the receptionist seemed to know exactly why they were there, probably because Mei had shared their work data while being upgraded. Hiro waited at the reception. But before doing so, he asked the receptionist how long Mei's upgrade would take. According to the receptionist, in Mei's case, this wasn't really an upgrade, but a body transfer process, so it wouldn't take long. A body transfer is when the studio performs maintenance on parts like replacing muscle fibers or fixing worn-out joints. This light maintenance helps upgrade the bodies in use. However, in this case, they would be replacing everything, from the skeletal structure to the muscle fibers, and even the central processors. For such cases, transferring data to a new body is easier. So essentially, it was like upgrading a computer, and it would take no more than 2 hours. While Mei was undergoing the transfer process, the receptionist kept Hiro company and offered some advice on how to live with robots like Mei, as well as things to remember when maintaining such robots. Before Hiro realized it, his Enel had dropped significantly without him noticing. Finally, Mei was complete. Although her exterior seemed unchanged, the receptionist assured him that Mei had become much stronger internally, and she was now far more powerful. She was now on par with an average combat robot. Additionally, it seemed Mei had been equipped with some combat tools, including an item resembling a grenade, and a fairly powerful security baton. However, besides these, it appeared that as part of the customization request, Hiro would need to perform an operational test with Mei. This meant they had to do something rather unexpected. After the test, Hiro felt a bit embarrassed. But he couldn't deny that the experience with Mei was so impressive that he couldn't even put it into words. Still, since this wasn't the reason Hiro bought Mei in the first place, he felt as though he had paid to free Mei from slavery, so she could do anything he wanted with her, which only made him feel more guilty. On top of that, he had taken Mei to meet Mimi and Elma, making his heart feel even heavier. It got worse when they returned to Krishna, and an unfortunate incident awaited Hiro. It turned out that some soldiers had come aboard the ship and forcibly stopped Hiro from accessing his vehicle, leaving him confused and unsure of what was happening. Hiro tried to explain everything to the soldiers, and while they were waiting for confirmation, Mei began to wonder who these soldiers were. Using her hard drive system, Mei quickly discovered that these men were soldiers of Count Darenwald. They had been sent here to protect Christina. In fact, the Count had contacted the group. But Hiro hadn't received the message because it had come in while Mei was being upgraded. When Hiro checked the message, it seemed Mei was right. After a while, once they received confirmation, the soldiers finally allowed them to pass. Since Elma was aware of the message and chose not to give it to them, Hiro suspected that she might have known he and Mei were up to something a little hot. Although he didn't think this could be resolved with just a few words, Hiro decided to leave things as they were and not apologize to Elma. At least, that was his plan. But as soon as he entered the room and saw Elma patiently waiting for them in the kitchen, Hiro immediately kneeled and apologized for his incompetence. Even Mei apologized, asking Elma if she was really not angry about what had happened between her and Hiro. Elma quickly reassured her that she had no problem with Mei, but she still wanted Hiro to think about what had transpired. As the tension slowly faded, Hiro suddenly noticed that Christina and Mimi looked sad, hugging each other. He began to wonder what had happened between them. Elma quickly explained that, since they were now receiving communication from the Count, it meant Christina would soon be returning to him. Having shared a room and been together for such a long time, Elma said it would be very difficult for them to part ways. Elma also mentioned that the Count had informed them that he wanted to meet Christina as soon as possible and hoped she would be kept safe. This message had been sent through the guild's network, and the secretary had confirmed Christina's safety, so everything would be fine. However, since Hiro was always the one in charge, the final decision still lay with him. With this new information, the group immediately set to work, preparing for the meeting. Hiro and his team were instructed to travel in an armored vehicle, which made sense to ensure Christina's safety. However, they hadn't expected that the Count would want them to accompany him, as they had assumed he would simply send someone else in their place. Elma then suggested that perhaps the Count didn't want their first meeting to be just through a message, no matter what the reason was. Christina just hoped this wasn't some trap set by her uncle. As they continued their conversation, they finally arrived at the base, where Christina's grandfather's ship was waiting. Looking at the massive size and power of the ship, Hiro concluded that Christina's grandfather was undoubtedly a Count, which also meant he would be extremely cautious around outsiders. As soon as they landed, a long line of female servants and a butler warmly greeted them, clearly excited for the return of their master's granddaughter. The butler immediately said he would take Christina to meet her grandfather, while Hiro and his team would wait in the guest room. Although Hiro was very nervous about letting Christina go alone, he hesitated for a moment. But when Christina gave him an assuring look, he hesitated for a moment. He finally allowed the butler to take her, while his team continued to wait in the guest room. Mimi looked around, clearly surprised and impressed by the interior of the ship, which didn't resemble a regular ship at all. It felt more like a 5-star hotel or a luxurious mansion, with a garden visible through the windows as they enjoyed their tea. Elma explained that this was the Count's personal fleet ship, but it was also understandable that it served as a vacation home and guest house, which explained the abundance of maids and butlers. Thinking about this, Hiro wondered if it would be possible to turn Krishna into a place like this. However, before he could start thinking about making such changes, Elma spoke up, saying there was no need to do that, since Krishna was already livable. From the automated cooking devices to the ship's systems, Krishna was certainly on par with high-end places like this. Furthermore, they had maidroids, so there was no need to upgrade it into something as luxurious as this. Realizing Elma was right, Hiro dismissed his initial thoughts. However, if they view a ship as a living space, a large ship would be much more comfortable than Krishna. Of course, it's not cheap, but still far cheaper than buying high-ranking citizenship in the Empire, or purchasing land and building a house on a planet. Moreover, it would enhance mobility and open up more opportunities for making money through work. That's why Hiro is considering buying a mother ship. On top of that, Krishna has started to feel cramped. He doesn't plan to add more people to the crew, but a bigger ship would make more sense at this point. After a brief conversation, a maid entered the room and announced that Count Abraham Durinwald was on his way to meet the team. Immediately, Hiro and his crew showed their respect. Even though the Count might already know Hiro's identity, he introduced himself as the captain, a member of the Mercenary Alliance. He also informed the Count that he wasn't familiar with proper etiquette, and asked for forgiveness if his actions surprised him. The Count continued to assure Hiro that he didn't need to be overly formal. But his presence made Hiro feel uneasy. The Count's dignified demeanor seemed to reinforce his noble status. Once they were invited to sit, Hiro and his team relaxed a bit. Surprisingly, the Count immediately thanked them for their excellent work in protecting and ensuring Christina's safety. As the head of the Durinwald family and Christina's grandfather, he expressed his personal gratitude. Hiro, always blunt, didn't hesitate to point out that the job had been far from easy. Curious, the Count wanted to know exactly what had happened. And although Elma thought this might be disrespectful to the Count, Hiro went ahead and recounted everything the team had been through to get there, from unexpected adventures to battles with space pirates. Since Hiro's account matched Christina's, the Count promised to reward the team handsomely, covering all necessary expenses. This promise delighted Hiro, who had spent a lot of money on the mission. Now that Christina was safe with them, Elma asked Count Durinwald what his next plan was. After some thought, he wanted Hiro and his crew to continue the protection mission. Despite having mobilized all the fighting power he could, his opponents were a fleet from the regular military, which he didn't take lightly. Moreover, he saw no reason why mercenaries would refuse such a worthy reward. Without hesitation, Hiro seized the opportunity and declared that they would accept the mission, no matter what. After the brief meeting, as they returned to the ship, Hiro couldn't help but feel excited about what lay ahead. Having spent quite a bit of NL on the resort, Hiro was even more thrilled when Count Durinwald offered to reimburse him in full. On top of that, the 8 million NL reward for protecting Christina made him even more excited. After deducting all expenses, he was left with about 24.4 million. Buying a mothership no longer seemed out of reach. On top of that, they would also earn around 250,000 NL per day for the next escort mission. However, this reward seemed suspiciously high, since the daily bonuses usually ranged around 80,000. Elma explained that the larger amount included a silent fee, because the incident was a scandal that could potentially ruin the Durinwald family. The Count was essentially asking Hiro to keep quiet about the whole matter. As he thought about it, Hiro realized he had already told Serena about the situation. He also wondered about the Empire's military involvement, since defectors would also be a huge scandal. Elma continued, explaining that both the Count and the military were actually playing a game, each side wanting to keep the issue between themselves. If the news got out, Hiro could end up making enemies of both the Count and the Empire's military. So, he had no choice but to stay silent. Once they returned to Krishna, Hiro and the girls went to rest. After changing and relaxing for a while, Hiro suddenly felt bored. Mimi and Elma went shopping, having stayed at Krishna long enough to need some downtime. Things were safer around them now, thanks to the Count, but May still accompanied them for precaution. That left Hiro and Krishna with nothing to do. And for some reason, Hiro felt like he couldn't function well without the girls around. Lost in thought, the doorbell suddenly rang. Hiro wondered who could be visiting Krishna without an appointment. Hiro checked the surveillance camera. And to his surprise, the visitor was none other than Serena. It seemed like she was on vacation and feeling bored, so she decided to drop by. Not wanting to engage with her, Hiro tried to send her away to rest with her subordinates, even calling her a lonely person. But before Hiro could realize it, Serena started to cry. In the end, Hiro decided to let her in. Seeing her act this way made him feel guilty for turning her away earlier. Feeling bored himself, he decided to spend some time with her since there was nothing else to do. However, he thought it would be inappropriate for an officer to come aboard alone, so Hiro decided to take her out for a walk around the empire. Out on the streets, Hiro suggested they stroll along the main avenue of the colony, explaining that strolling simply meant walking without a specific purpose, just looking for something interesting. Since this area had many tourist spots, they were sure to find something fun for Serena. After wandering around for a while, they decided to visit a VR station, which also excited Hiro. Initially, VR stations were set up to serve people waiting to disembark on vacation planets or those who couldn't go for some reason. They could use VR equipment to at least feel like they were enjoying a vacation. But now, due to the growing interest in advanced VR, the VR industry had become a major part of the tourism sector. However, Serena felt this might not be the best choice for them. Hiro was confused, not understanding what she meant. He asked her what she had in mind, and Serena responded that it was absurd to go outside only to lock themselves in a VR space. It seemed like she was on vacation and feeling bored, so she decided to drop by. Not wanting to engage with her, Hiro tried to send her away to rest with her subordinates. Instead, Serena suggested they visit a restaurant. She explained that the Sierra Star system was a top-tier resort destination on a galactic scale, offering exquisite food and drinks from all across the galaxy, even beyond the Empire. The place was highly rated, especially for its beverages, meaning anyone could enjoy a wide variety of drinks. However, Hiro didn't like the idea, worried that Serena might end up getting completely drunk. As they began to argue in public, a group of suspicious-looking men approached them. They stared at Serena and cast unwanted glances her way. These men claimed they had struck gold, implying they had malicious intentions and might try to take advantage of her in ways Hiro couldn't quite imagine. Especially knowing Serena wasn't just any woman. Hiro warned the two men that he wouldn't tolerate them laying a hand on her. And as a result, the men became enraged, with one of them suddenly charging at Hiro. As the man yanked at his clothing, although Hiro wasn't one for diplomacy, he couldn't just stand by without teaching them a lesson. However, before he could act, Serena stepped in first. Seeing Serena's sword, both men recoiled in fear, and without needing to do anything more, they ran off like cowards. When they realized Serena was nobility, they hurried away in terror. From that look, it was clear that commoners in this world truly feared the nobility, which was, sadly, a stark reality. But that issue was temporarily set aside, as there could be more dangerous individuals approaching them. In the end, both Hiro and Serena decided to head to the restaurant. As they enjoyed their dinner, Serena couldn't hide her delight. She was absolutely thrilled by the delicious food. While Hiro had discreetly sent a distress signal to Mimi and Elma, just in case, he didn't think he could handle Serena alone if she ended up getting too drunk. Despite his efforts to hide it, Serena noticed what he was doing. Hiro quickly explained that he was only trying to ensure their safety, and it was then that Serena told him she had always thought he was cold toward her, as though he was building a wall between them. She suggested that it would be nice if Hiro could open up to her a bit more. Without hesitation, Hiro replied that he felt it would only cause trouble. He explained that as a lieutenant in the Imperial Fleet and the daughter of a duke, Serena needed to maintain her distance from him. Moreover, he felt she shouldn't be concerned about him, since she could surely find a fiancé, someone worthy of a woman like her, the daughter of a duke. Though Hiro's words stung, Serena felt a slight sadness, but in the end, she accepted that was Hiro's true intention. Her real concern was that she might end up living alone as she grew older. To comfort her a little, Hiro reassured her that would never happen to someone of noble blood. He was certain that other nobles had already introduced her to potential suitors. Even so, Serena felt she hadn't met anyone who truly matched what she wanted in a life partner. The last man she encountered was so spoiled he had never even held a sword, let alone a gun. Then there was one who was too weak, unable to defeat her in a sword fight, despite being muscular. She had even met some excellent swordsmen, but their personalities were terrible, ready to kill commoners as if it were nothing. Based on Serena's complaints, Hiro concluded that while these men might not be ideal, they certainly weren't suited to her preferences. But even he himself wasn't the type she likely wanted. While he could use a gun, swords were a different matter entirely. However, Serena had to admit she was somewhat surprised that Hiro knew how to wield a sword, considering he wasn't of noble blood. Moreover, Serena had also become quite taken with Hiro's bravery and courage. He had fought off a horde of alien creatures in full combat gear, devised a new strategy, flown into a fleet of the Alliance alone, and executed his plan flawlessly, despite being an outsider. He had restructured the independent pirate fighting fleet and had an incredible tactical mind for creating an effective battle plan against the pirates. Because of this, Serena felt that these qualities of Hiro's far outweighed his swordsmanship. Hiro, listening to all of this, almost felt sick to his stomach, as he never expected Serena to hold him in such high regard. However, since he wanted to be completely honest with her, Hiro immediately said he didn't think this would work at all. Even if they loved each other, Serena was a noble, and he was just a commoner, a fact he was well aware of. Serena, however, suggested that it wouldn't be a big problem. If Hiro could at least rise to platinum rank, everything would be fine. And if he could achieve the gold star, it would be even better. This was the first time Hiro had ever heard of the gold star. Serena went on to explain that the gold star was the common name for the first-class Star Cross medal. Only those who achieved outstanding military feats for the Empire were awarded this honor. In fact, it was the highest distinction a soldier could receive. It was a limited award, but those who earned it would be treated as equals to a marquis and given a corresponding position. Serena believed Hiro could somehow obtain this medal. However, for Hiro, even if he could win the gold star, dating Serena was an entirely different matter. Clearly, this only made Serena even more furious. But the lesson here is simple: you can't force someone to love you. After the forced date between Hiro and Serena, the two finally returned home and began focusing on their own tasks as they prepared for the next mission. Mimi reported to Hiro that the fleet had received clearance to depart. Since they were the escort team, it was crucial to maintain perfect synchronization and never break formation under any circumstances. She also informed him that it had been 3 days since they handed Christina over to the Count, and at last, they were about to leave Sierra Prime. Hiro had endured the chaos caused by the intruder, but now everything was set for the journey ahead, including preparations for May's maintenance bay. It seemed that Hiro and his team were doing a pretty good job, as they had been hired for another task. This time, they were assigned to protect the fleet carrying the Count and Christina. Fortunately, most of the fleet was equipped with military-grade weaponry, so with any luck, Krishna wouldn't have to do much heavy lifting. Their destination was the capital star system, known as Duxer. Hiro had anticipated that the journey would be long, so they would have to rely on several hyperspeed ships and space gates along the way. All Hiro could hope for was a smooth trip without any attacks, so he could make a clean profit from this job. After all, 250,000 anel per day was an astounding amount of money. Elma, on the other hand, had a hunch that the Count was doing this just to show off. Still, she couldn't deny that if word got out that a high-ranking noble had hired a mid-tier gold team at a standard market rate, it would definitely draw a lot of attention. People would start gossiping that the noble family was on the decline. With her insight into how these things worked, Elma was certain that it wasn't just nobles who acted this way, merchants did it too. Typically, merchants would pay 1.5 times the market rate, while nobles would pay double. It was considered a status trend. Hearing this, Mimi was stunned. She never expected that this was how the wealthy spent their money. The sums were so enormous that it no longer felt real to her. However, Elma felt that what Mimi said was quite silly, since, from the perspective of an average person, Mimi was also making a ton of money. Embarrassed by Elma's remark, the awkward atmosphere was broken when May announced that they had received a synchronization request. Mimi quickly initiated sync mode with the Count's fleet, linking their system with the hyperspeed engine and hyperdrive. With everything in place, Hiro allowed himself to relax a little, thinking that they could finally leave the rest of the work to the fleet. But in the midst of this, they encountered a space gate that was much larger than usual. Hiro eventually concluded that these gates were significantly different from those he had seen in the game, both in terms of size and shape. In truth, this wasn't the first difference Hiro had noticed between this world and Seoul, but it was by far the most striking. It made him realize how difficult it was to estimate distances in space. Just comparing it to a colony was enough to grasp its colossal size. The Empire's ships docked nearby looked like tiny grains of rice. And at the very center stood the true space gate. A structure that bent time and space to create a connection across vast distances. It was said to be a fusion of the Empire's most advanced technologies. However, Hiro had no idea how it actually worked, and he figured that, even if someone explained it, he still wouldn't understand. So, for now, he decided to stop thinking about it. On the other hand, Mimi noticed that no enemies had attacked them on their way to the gate. This made her wonder if they were lying in wait on the other side, ready for an ambush. Considering this possibility, Hiro thought it was indeed plausible that enemies might strike after they passed through the gate. But he suspected that if they did attack, it would most likely happen near the gate's exit point. Mimi felt confused, so Elma explained that space gates could transport ships across thousands, or even tens of thousands, of light years. This made them one of the most critical infrastructures in the entire empire. In simple terms, if someone were to destroy or seize control of a space gate, it would cause unimaginable damage to the empire, not just in terms of logistics, but also in terms of strategic positioning. This meant that the defensive forces stationed at these gates had to be on a completely different level. As a result, they required an overwhelming amount of firepower to fend off potential enemies. Even Krishna would be reduced to ashes in an instant if it faced that kind of firepower. This also meant that once they passed through the space gate, the road ahead would be filled with danger. The star systems of Nipuk and Melkut were under the direct control of the empire. Meanwhile, Kumat and their destination, Duxer, were part of the Count's territory. This meant that any major threats would most likely come from Ziegel and Wellick. If the Count had good relations with the nobles in those areas, they might offer him an escort team as support. However, even if they made a formal request to the Count, it was unlikely that he would easily disclose private matters between nobles. With this in mind, Hiro decided to ask Mei for her opinion on the matter. According to Mei, the most likely point for an attack would be right after they left the Kumat star system. It was clear that the fall of Count de Reinwald would deal a significant blow to Lord, but it would also affect Balthazar, the Count's son, since that was his homeland. Based on previous events, Mei speculated that while the exact method of attack remained unclear, she believed that Balthazar was exceptionally skilled at manipulating others. Given this, it was highly likely that he would concentrate his power within Count Derinwald's territory, where he could easily assert his influence. As a result, the possibility of an ambush after they passed through the Kumat star system via hyperdrive was extremely high. At the very least, Mei concluded that this scenario was highly probable. After all, the enemy had already launched an attack on their team with a force that exceeded their expectations. She was also convinced that Balthazar was using every trick in the book to push their team into a corner. After hearing this, Hiro asked Elma for her opinion on whether they should inform the Count about the situation. After a brief moment of thought, Elma wasn't entirely sure. It felt a bit like accusing a noble territory of disloyalty, a serious charge. Hiro found that somewhat reasonable, especially since the Count's own son had already betrayed him. Even so, to Elma, the Count was still a noble. With a status as high as his, he would certainly not want his honor to be tarnished by accusations from outsiders. This only gave Hiro even more to think about. For now, Hiro and the girls decided to relax and make the most of their remaining free time. Spending it playing an online game together, Mimi reassured Christina, who was currently on the mothership, telling her there was no need to worry about any potential attack since Hiro would handle everything. However, Elma, ever the straightforward one, shattered their hopes, pointing out that Hiro wasn't some invincible all-powerful being. Even so, Mimi's faith in Hiro remained unshaken. No matter what happened, she firmly believed in his abilities. With that, they were now relaxing as they moved through hyperspace. Since the navigation system was fully automated, there was nothing for the crew to do unless they were attacked. And what better way to kill time than by playing mahjong? The fact that mahjong even existed in this world surprised Hiro. While Christina remained on the Count's ship, Mei and Hiro stayed in the cockpit, just in case of a sudden ambush. To pass the time, they decided to play a few rounds of an online game. It was Mimi's first time playing this game, and to everyone's surprise, she turned out to be exceptionally good at it. The other girls were in disbelief, especially since Mimi was leading the scoreboard while Elma had somehow sunk to the very bottom. This left Elma feeling quite frustrated. At the moment, Hiro couldn't deny that Mimi's strategy was downright bizarre. Yet, for some reason, her risky moves were working, and she even managed to draw a thin sumo. Meanwhile, Elma's strategy remained solid. However, she kept drawing bad cards, leading to a streak of losses. The sight of the two clashing felt like a battle between extraordinary luck and relentless misfortune, and it was clear Hiro was thoroughly enjoying it. Despite passing through space gates, they weren't attacked at Ziegel or Wellick. Now, as they prepared to warp out of the Kumat star system, Mei's prediction seemed to be coming true. The enemy would strike the moment they left. According to Mimi, since the Count had uncovered the entire plot, it felt as if there was nowhere left to run, no matter how hard they tried. It was precisely because there was no way out. Mei further explained that Balthazar was desperate. Given the current situation, he could not escape the inevitable collapse of his own position. But with the ambition he had displayed, fleeing or seeking asylum was unlikely. From his perspective, if the Count and Lady Christina were to die, he could seize control of the family through brute force. After all, It was the only option left for him now. He was undoubtedly planning to take control of everything after inheriting the title. Therefore, if the enemy did launch an attack, they had to be ready to face whatever was thrown at them, because there was no turning back anymore. Hiro's only plan now was to keep himself and his crew as flexible as possible, ready to adapt to any situation. To put it bluntly, this meant they had no concrete plan at all. The moment they warped out of space, Hiro immediately noticed that every ship in the fleet was on high alert. This could only mean one thing: they were surrounded by enemies. However, the unidentified ships looked just like ordinary warships. Despite the fleet's attempts to establish contact through wide-range communication channels, there was no response. To make matters worse, these ships weren't attacking. They were merely circling them. This strongly suggested that the enemy's goal wasn't to engage in battle, but to trap them in this area, waiting for something, or someone, to arrive. Within seconds, Mimi's radar picked up something rapidly approaching their position from beyond radar range. Based on its trajectory, it seemed to be headed straight for the Count's ship. This was likely the reason why the enemy had been stalling. Without hesitation, Hiro and his crew immediately activated the engines to full power and accelerated. When the target finally appeared on screen, the entire team was stunned by its unusual appearance. Long and slender, even Hiro, who had spent considerable time in Seoul, had never seen a ship like this before. Despite the strangeness of its design, Hiro was confident that Krishna's laser could take it down. But when they opened fire, they quickly realized the enemy ship's shields were far too strong. No matter how much firepower they unleashed, it was all in vain. Meanwhile, the target only continued to accelerate. Even with Krishna moving at maximum speed, they still couldn't catch up to the strange ship. No matter how hard they pushed, the gap only grew wider. Worse yet, the mysterious ship pierced straight through the Count's vessel. Hiro immediately called for a status report as he checked the data on the screen. Strangely, there was no change in thermal or phase readings, even after the collision. This left Hiro puzzled. Does that mean it didn't self-destruct? He wondered aloud. Meanwhile, Elma conducted further scans and noticed that the other ships were merely holding their positions, making no aggressive moves. This only deepened Hiro's confusion. What is that ship really trying to do? He muttered. According to May's assessment, it was highly likely that the enemy ship was a suppression vessel. This type of ship is designed to pierce the hull of a target ship using a collision horn. Once the hull is breached, it deploys boarding tubes, allowing soldiers to flood inside and seize control of the target ship from within. This type of ship is equipped with an exceptionally powerful shield, a high-capacity propulsion system, and a saturation shield defense mechanism. However, it carries no weapons. All its power is focused on infiltration and suppression. Yet, no matter how much May tried to explain, Hiro still couldn't fully grasp the situation. Up until now, he had always believed that Balthazar's only goal was to kill the Count and Christina. If that's really the case, Hiro wondered, why bother infiltrating their ship at all? A single reaction bomb would do the job. But as Elma thought it over, she realized it wasn't entirely impossible. Nobles of the Empire often placed great value on swordsmanship. This meant Balthazar might actually be on that ship. And as a noble of the Empire, he would likely want to resolve the matter with a sword. Suddenly, everything started to make more sense. Even so, Hiro still couldn't fully understand the values and mindset of nobles in this world. But looking at the bigger picture, he realized that if Balthazar didn't settle things with a sword, it could damage the unity of the faction supporting him. With all that in mind, Hiro muttered to himself, "So, what should we do about this strange ship?" According to May, since the ship had connected directly with the Count's vessel, there were many dangers to consider, including the possibility of an explosion. This led to one option. They had to board the ship and face their enemies in hand-to-hand combat. Though May admitted it was an incredibly risky move, it seemed they had no choice. Hiro couldn't just stand by, arms crossed, doing nothing, while the Count and others fought for their lives. Besides, if the Count mistook him for an enemy and shot him, it would only increase his bounty. But more than anything, he needed to save Christina, no matter the cost. With that in mind, Elma and Mimi were assigned to stay with Krishna, while Hiro took May with him. As soon as they set foot on the Count's ship, Hiro was struck by the eerie silence. It didn't feel like a battlefield at all. Yet, they had to remain cautious, avoiding any action that could draw attention and reveal their presence. However, moving stealthily seemed like a significant challenge, especially now that May had been upgraded. While her weaponized power armor was impressive, its sheer presence attracted too much attention. From a physical standpoint, it seemed impossible, but it was likely some sort of advanced, mysterious technology. So, Hiro decided to set that aside for the time being. His own power armor, built with heavy plating and strong firepower, was designed for heavy combat. He hoped he could handle the typical close-quarters fights without Mei's help. Before leaving, Elma reminded him to stay vigilant and avoid getting hit by any noble swords. If he did, he'd be cut down instantly. His armor was like tofu against a noble's blade. On top of that, a noble's sword could deflect laser beams, so Hiro had to be extra careful not to be caught by a ricochet. On their way to the main hall, Hiro asked Mei if ships using a direct ramming tactic like this were common in this world. According to Mei, it didn't seem that way. Some amateurs had built these ships through connections, but they were few in number and rarely used. The success rate for this type of ship was very low. In the military, these ships were often referred to as expensive coffins. Still, Balthazar had successfully executed this strategy, and without Hiro, someone like Balthazar could have easily escaped with all his schemes intact. That's why, in this mission, Hiro had to remain fully focused. This would be their only chance to ensure everyone's safety, no matter what happened. As they moved deeper into the ship, Mimi reported a gunfight happening in the room to the left. As soon as Hiro stepped inside, he was surprised to see the crew, dressed like maids and butlers, a truly surreal sight for him. Yet, this didn't seem strange to Mei. Now that they were here, Hiro's power armor left the enemies stunned, as they hadn't expected anyone to be equipped like this on the ship. However, realizing the situation could turn bloody, Hiro ordered the crew to fall back, leaving him and Mei to handle the enemies themselves. As the battle began, despite the relentless gunfire, their old-fashioned weapons couldn't penetrate Hiro's modern armor. Thanks to the overwhelming power and defense of his suit, Hiro and Mei could easily press on if they wished. But to their surprise, the enemies also wore power armor. It seemed to be a mid-range model, designed for military use. This made Hiro realize that the enemies had prioritized mobility, likely to counter fast-moving targets. However, in the narrow space, the agility of their armor provided little advantage. Hiro's strength and defensive capabilities were crucial in gaining the upper hand in the fight. Additionally, Mei's precise sniping skills offered significant support, allowing them to easily push back the enemies. With just a bit more effort, they could clear all the foes in no time. As they moved from one enemy to the next, they quickly swept through the obstacles and reached the next room. At that moment, Mimi reported that the remaining enemies were concentrated in the grand hall at the end of the corridor. Knowing time was running out, Hiro ordered Mei to move ahead. To his surprise, she ran faster than he expected. When they finally reached the main hall, Hiro was stunned by the scene before him. What he saw was horrifying. Many had been killed in battle, but not by lasers or explosions by sword slashes. In that moment, Hiro couldn't help but wonder if this was really the power of a noble's blade. The sight sent a chill down his spine. Even with the protection of his powerful armor. As Hiro scanned the area, he found a room where Christina and the others were. From what he could see, Christina seemed fine. But the Count had suffered serious injuries. Luckily, his wounds didn't appear to be fatal. As Hiro continued to observe, his gaze fixed on a man standing with two swords in hand. There was no mistaking it. It was Balthazar Durinwald. Without hesitation, Mei charged at him. Hiro was stunned by Balthazar's abilities as he effortlessly deflected laser beams with his swords. Though Balthazar's physical abilities had been enhanced through cybernetics, Hiro never expected him to be this strong. The fact that Balthazar could face Mei head-on, even after she had been fully optimized, proved he was a far greater threat than Hiro had anticipated. However, that didn't mean they were going to back down. Even though Balthazar's physical prowess had been dramatically increased, Hiro was fairly certain he wouldn't be able to dodge Balthazar's next attack. But he was wrong. Just as Hiro prepared to fire a laser at Balthazar, the man effortlessly sliced through Hiro's laser guns with a single swing of his blade. As the battle grew more intense, Hiro ordered Mei to switch the guns to their focused mode, determined to defeat Balthazar. He reasoned that if it was a portable weapon, the battery capacity couldn't be too high, so their only option was to fire a series of powerful lasers to break through his shield. As they unleashed everything they had, a thick smoke began to cover the battlefield. Hiro wondered if Balthazar was activating a self-destruct mode. But according to Mei, it was just a smokescreen tactic to reduce the effectiveness of their lasers. Meaning Balthazar was trying to conceal himself. Instead of continuing to fire, Hiro decided to throw the entire laser gun at Balthazar. To his surprise, the plan worked. Balthazar tripped and fell to the ground from the unexpected attack. As Hiro checked to see if Balthazar had fallen, he hoped this would be the moment his opponent would finally stop fighting. However, what surprised everyone was that Balthazar wasn't defeated. He had only been pretending, and in an instant, he gripped his sword tightly, ready to fight again. The group grew worried about Hiro's situation. The question was whether he could avoid this next attack, or if this would be the end of his illustrious life. In reality, Even a noble sword like Balthazar's couldn't cut through Hiro's shield. In fact, Hiro's shield was so powerful that he could easily defeat Balthazar in a matter of moments. Still, Hiro couldn't deny that for a brief moment, he had thought Balthazar's sword might pierce his defenses. But fortunately, that didn't happen. After Balthazar was defeated, Hiro turned to Count Darenwald and asked what should be done with the man. The Count ordered his men to capture Balthazar immediately to prevent him from causing further harm. Additionally, the Count suggested that Hiro take Balthazar's sword, as he was the one who had defeated him. Although Hiro had no intention of accepting it, the Count insisted that he should, since Hiro had helped him resolve the issue with his son. In the end, Hiro took the sword, as the Count requested. Meanwhile, the leader of the enemy forces was captured, and all enemies on the ship were subdued, while the warships surrounding them were either destroyed or surrendered. This attack had indeed caused significant damage, both in terms of property and the lives of the Count's fleet. The fleet would need repairs and supplies, so they planned to stop at a colony in the Kumat star system. Meanwhile, Hiro and his team would continue their guard duty, though Krishna would be stationed on the deck of the Count's flagship. As for the rest of the crew, they were in a state of readiness, meaning they could do as they pleased. After a long and tense day, they desperately needed some rest. Hiro had planned to enjoy his well-earned break when Christina visited him with a sweet smile. She greeted him with a simple, "Good evening." Upon seeing her, Hiro immediately remarked that he didn't expect Christina to be out, considering how busy the fleet was. As they began to chat casually, Hiro expressed his thoughts about Christina's grandfather. It seemed that all this time, Hiro had felt the Count's constant scowl, as if he didn't like Hiro interfering in his affairs. Christina was fully aware of her grandfather's usual discontent, but she reassured Hiro that the Count genuinely valued him, and there was no doubt about that while she was here. Hiro seized this opportunity to give Christina one of her most prized possessions. Now that Balthazar had been captured, Hiro promised her that she would no longer be a target. And that also meant his duty as her knight and protector was over. Hearing this, Christina felt a wave of sadness and worry, fearing she would never see Hiro again. Without hesitation, she confessed her feelings for Hiro, a love that was more than just friendship. It turned out that Hiro had been aware of this for a long time. No matter the situation, he knew that to Christina, he was like a dashing knight who had come to save her. But Hiro understood that her feelings were likely just a fleeting infatuation. However, to Christina, it was something very serious. Her confession took all his courage away, leaving Hiro with a bittersweet sense of joy. Still, he bluntly told her that he couldn't return her feelings. This shocked Christina, as she hadn't truly expected Hiro to reject her. Not wanting to hurt her further, Hiro continued to explain that her life as a noble was completely different from his own. A life as a mercenary. Although love for someone shouldn't depend on their circumstances, Hiro was simply being realistic about the situation. He made Christina realize that they weren't suited to be together. However, it seemed Christina was so serious about him that she was willing to give up her noble title. Now, with everything becoming more serious, Hiro explained that she couldn't do that. She was the sole heir of the Darenwald family, and if she truly renounced her title, who would carry on the legacy of her parents and ancestors? Moreover, if she did so, the Count would undoubtedly come after him. For this reason, Hiro made her understand that he was only being cautious for his own survival, and could not choose a path that would put those he cared about in danger. At that moment, Christina couldn't hold back her emotions any longer. She broke into tears, fearing that everything between her and Hiro would change. Fortunately, May arrived just in time to comfort her. However, as soon as May and Christina left, Hiro found himself unable to suppress the mixed emotions inside him. It seemed he felt guilty for not having the right skills to comfort a girl properly. In the end, Hiro had rejected Christina and left everything to May, which made him feel guilty toward May and even begin to hate himself. Still, by this point Hiro felt that facing pirates was easier than dealing with girls confessing their feelings. Speaking of which, Mimi suddenly entered his room and jumped straight onto the bed. Confused and unsure of what was happening, Hiro asked, "What are you doing, Mimi?" At first, Mimi looked fine, until she suddenly burst into tears. It turned out that Mimi had heard about what happened between Hiro and Christina, and she couldn't control her emotions. When she learned that Hiro had chosen her and Elma over Christina, Mimi explained that she was so happy Hiro had chosen them, so happy that she couldn't help but cry. She worried that Hiro would replace them with Christina. But after hearing the news, Mimi couldn't help but feel relieved, even though she felt sorry for Christina. However, when Mimi thought back, she knew Hiro was probably feeling worse than they were right now, so she tried to hold back her emotions. Although Hiro wasn't great at comforting others, he did his best to make Mimi feel better. After all, he understood her feelings to some extent, since she had been Christina's friend from the beginning. So, clearly, Mimi couldn't forgive herself for feeling happy even though she'd been hurt. But thanks to her, Hiro felt the dark emotions from earlier gradually fade away. Moreover, it seemed like nothing made Mimi feel more at peace than being with Hiro like this. After their short conversation, the two of them finally went to meet the others. Elma appeared much calmer than Mimi. It wasn't because Elma seemed indifferent, but because she knew there was no way the Count would allow Hiro to have a relationship with Christina in the first place. Moreover, she understood that Christina didn't have the time for such matters. This remark confused Hiro a bit, as he didn't quite understand what Elma meant. Then Elma continued, explaining that since Christina was the sole heir, if anything happened to the head of the family, her grandfather, there would be trouble if an unprepared heir had to take over. This meant that the Count had the duty to prioritize Christina's education, which also meant she couldn't freely pursue romance or anything like that. Hearing this, Hiro felt a bit sorry for Christina, but since it was her duty as a noble in the empire, there wasn't much they could do about it. After all, power came with great responsibility. Now that the issue with Christina was resolved, it seemed like Hiro's problem was May. However, Elma reassured him that everything would be fine, as long as nothing unexpected happened. Moreover, the Empire's mechanical geniuses were focused on building relationships. Or more precisely, they were desperate for a happy ending, no matter their personalities. As they were talking quietly, May suddenly interrupted, saying that love and romance, to her, would save the universe. Now, Hiro remembered that May was a love addict. Realizing that he might have unintentionally given Christina some strange advice, Hiro immediately asked May to confirm. May quickly explained that she hadn't given any weird advice. In fact, she had told Christina to focus on studying, developing both her mind and body to reach full potential, as the heir to Count Darrenwald. If she could achieve that, no one would object. If Christina wanted to claim Hiro for herself. She looked at Hiro, a glimmer of hope in her eyes. Christina felt motivated to improve, to be able to be with Hiro in the future. This clearly surprised Hiro, as he never planned to become a noble. The next day, the group got back to work. While working, Elma was somewhat surprised by Hiro's serious expression. It turned out he was thinking about the reward he hoped for and wondering if it was time to buy a mothership. Since Hiro had mentioned it, Elma was curious about what kind of ship he was looking to own. Hiro had narrowed down his choices. The first ship on his list was the Nighthawk. This model was designed with speed as its main feature, offering the best maneuverability in its class. However, its shielding, armor, and overall defense, as well as cargo capacity, were inferior to other motherships. For Elma, however, the sleek aerodynamic design of the ship made it a good choice, as it could outrun pursuers if they were ever chased. The second ship on Hiro's list was the Skidbladnir. Compared to the Nighthawk, this ship focused on defense, offering excellent durability and thick armor. It could carry a large amount of cargo, and its design allowed for significant customization. However, the heavy armor meant a substantial decrease in speed and overall maneuverability. For May, there was no doubt about handling the speed or weaknesses of this mothership, but the real question was whether it would be a good choice to fully exploit Krishna's potential. As they began to debate which ship to choose, Elma insisted that they go with the Nighthawk because, to her, speed was essential. Moreover, its evasive performance was strong, and the ability to retreat quickly when needed was very appealing. However, May suggested choosing the Skidbladnir for herself, arguing that the expanded cargo capacity had to be the primary consideration when buying a mothership. The reason was that they couldn't fully rely on the Nighthawk. Furthermore, Krishna could take off in most combat situations, so May believed the ship could be used in most battle scenarios. That's why she thought the mothership should prioritize defense over evasion or offense. If Hiro thought about it, May had a point, but from the perspective of team safety, the ability to retreat was also crucial. More importantly, Elma would be the one piloting the ship. This made Hiro feel that she wouldn't be suited for a slower ship. Now Hiro realized, May truly believed she would be the one piloting the mothership in the future. Based on her explanation, Elma and Mimi were essential members of Krishna, so by excluding other possibilities, she thought she would take on the pilot role from now on. From a safety standpoint, they could afford to take a little risk if only an artificial being like her was on board. Even in the worst-case scenario, if the mothership were shot down, they could still manage if only she were on the ship. After careful consideration, Hiro finally chose the Skidbladnir. After the rather serious discussion about the mothership, the Count finally summoned them for a meeting. As everyone took their seats, the Count announced that he hadn't summoned them to apply any pressure. All he wanted to express was his deep gratitude for what Hiro and his crew had done for them the previous day. The Count went on to apologize for the recent chain of events. He was well aware that his son was ambitious, and as a noble, he felt embarrassed for not realizing this sooner. Had it not been for Hiro and his crew's help, the Count knew he might have lost Christina. That's why he was incredibly grateful for their assistance. As the Count bowed his head, Hiro and the others couldn't believe their eyes. A nobleman was bowing to them. In addition, the Count had good news for the group. Because of the noble act they had done, the Count decided to repay them. He wanted to knight Hiro as one of his own. However, unlike what Christina had suggested, the Count was aware that Hiro would certainly turn down the offer. Hiro then suggested that perhaps they could buy him a new mothership, as this would be immensely helpful for him and his crew. He explained further that this ship would unlock Krishna's full potential, and fundamentally, it was the ship he truly wanted to earn more money. Since Hiro had already mentioned this directly to Christina, the Count found it a little odd, so he reminded Hiro that he wasn't expecting him to concern himself with his circumstances. The Count had friends, with whom he could disregard social formalities, despite their differing statuses. However, the Count was serious when he told Hiro that he would never allow the kind of relationship Christina was hoping for. Since the Count knew Hiro understood this, he decided not to repeat it again. As for the mothership, the Count told them that he knew a shipbuilder in the nearby Bradstar system. Since their crew was planning to go there anyway, the Count handed Hiro the Darenwald family crest. The crest proved that the Darenwald family supported Hiro, as they were involved in the export of mineral resources within the Bradstar system. If Hiro took this crest with him during negotiations, it would be highly beneficial. Hiro was seriously considering whether to accept the crest, as he felt it could bring him more trouble. However, the Count quickly reassured Hiro, telling him not to worry about the whirlwind of thoughts in his mind, as the crest wouldn't limit what he could do. As soon as the Count handed the crest to Hiro, he immediately excused himself, informing the group that he had to continue negotiations with the Imperial Army. But he gestured for the group, along with Christina, to have a meal and relax a little before he left. On his way out, the Count suddenly noticed Mimi, someone who reminded him of someone he had known before. Mimi quickly said that he must be mistaken, her voice slightly uneasy. But it was a rather strange comment from the Count. Elma and Hiro didn't think much of it and simply continued with their tasks. A few days later, Christina seemed to be trying to persuade Hiro to stay a little longer, but since everything had been resolved and there was no more work for a mercenary like Hiro and his crew, Hiro decided it was time to leave. Christina respected his decision, and only asked him to visit her if he had the time. As Hiro watched Christina change from a shy princess into a brave noblewoman everyone respected, he couldn't refuse her request. And their ship finally set off. Christina remained behind, alone, even though Hiro and his crew had departed. Despite everything, Christina felt grateful that she had been able to meet their crew. To her, Hiro had never been the type of person to settle down for long. He was like a bird flying freely through the skies, and she, a powerless girl, couldn't be the cage that held him back. Still, she hoped that in the coming years, when she had enough strength to stand beside him, she would strive to become a place where he could find safety. With May's encouraging words giving her strength and hope, Christina looked forward to the journey ahead, until the day she and Hiro would meet again. After several days of travel, Hiro and his crew finally arrived in the Bradstar system. As soon as they landed, Hiro informed the group that they should head straight for the main shipyard. However, when they checked, it seemed they were being scanned. The scan wasn't illegal, and they weren't military or police, so the best course of action was to ignore it. These scanners weren't hiding their identities either. Although Hiro didn't feel too concerned, being scanned like that wasn't exactly pleasant. However, since there were no signs of hostility, he decided to let it go. That is, until he noticed that more and more ships began scanning them. And those ships started to surround them. While these ships didn't directly harm the crew, Elma couldn't deny that they made her uneasy. With no other choice, Hiro decided to increase their speed to escape the strange ships. But when they requested to land, even more ships started scanning them. After analyzing the situation, May determined that these ships all belonged to the Space Dwerger Company. This left Elma puzzled, as the shipbuilder should have known they were coming, based on May's analysis. Perhaps it was because Krishna was such a rare ship, and the Brad system, home to so many curious people, would naturally be interested in something new to them, like Krishna. However, there were still too many ships for comfort. The Brad system was highly proactive in pursuing technology, and used pirates as test subjects in what they called evaluation trials. So much so that even shipbuilders hunted down pirates in the area. It was said that pirates typically avoided space around shipyards for this very reason. However, Hiro didn't find this situation comfortable at all. While it wasn't illegal, he couldn't help but feel it was a sign of disrespect. Thankfully, it seemed like they would still be able to land safely. As soon as they touched down, An android receptionist led them to the negotiation area inside. There, they met the person responsible for shipbuilding for Hiro. When Hiro opened the door, he was surprised to find the person he was about to meet looked like a child. Or more precisely, a dwarf. After all, they were in Space Dwerger, a place mostly inhabited by dwarves. But this was the first time Hiro had realized it. Once everyone was seated, the dwarf introduced herself as Sarah. The meeting began, and Sarah asked the group what kind of transport ship they were looking for. However, before Hiro could answer regarding the ship model he had in mind, Sarah interrupted and suggested they choose the SDM S020 model. She started to convince Hiro that this ship was the company's bestseller. Even though it was an older design, it still offered high performance. However, since this was such a good ship, Hiro knew it would be very expensive. But Sarah was willing to make adjustments, and the discussion about what changes could be made to the ship began. Eventually, Sarah presented Hiro with an exclusive contract with the company, and if Hiro signed it, she was ready to offer a significant discount, bringing the ship's price down to 22 million. However, Hiro remained suspicious. No one would easily offer such an exclusive contract to just anyone. Sarah explained that Hiro's quick rise from bronze to gold rank had made him a promising mercenary, which was why he received such a significant discount. But instead of feeling reassured, Hiro's doubts deepened. How did the company know so much about him? Why did they investigate him? What was their true intent? Before making a final decision, Hiro asked Sarah to clarify the nature of the exclusive contract. To help him understand, Sarah simplified the terms. First, Hiro and his team would continue to use the company's mothership. They'd also have access to the company's ship maintenance services. The company would regularly upload operational data to keep the ship updated. Most importantly, Hiro's achievements would be used in the company's advertising campaigns. But these 4 points were just a few terms in the contract. It could still be revised and expanded further. Hiro wasn't too concerned about the first 2 terms. But the latter ones raised his suspicions. To be sure, he decided to ask the team for their opinion. Elma felt there was no issue, as long as the company didn't take personal data. But if their actions were limited by the company's ads, she thought they should decline. May agreed, pointing out that Space Dwerger shouldn't control everything they did. Once the issue was clarified, Mimi asked why the company was advertising mercenary work in the first place. Sarah explained that it was because of the operational data mercenaries like Hiro held. She reassured them that only machine data would be shared, not their personal information. As for advertising, the company would use the data collected from mercenaries like Hiro and his team as real-world content in exchange. Hiro and his team would also receive priority media coverage. But Hiro still didn't fully understand what Sarah meant, so she continued explaining, the company wasn't just involved in spaceship manufacturing but also in entertainment. One of their standout products was documentaries about mercenaries taking down pirates, something audiences loved. Since Hiro knew little about the entertainment industry, he decided to consult Mimi before making his final decision. He was surprised to see how excited Mimi was about the idea. It turned out that back at the colony, Mimi had watched a lot of shows about mercenaries and hunters, which explained why she was so enthusiastic about the company producing a program about their team. Sarah also told Hiro that the lives of permanent residents in the colonies and space travelers were fascinating, so shows about mercenaries were highly popular. By now, the group had a clearer understanding of what the company intended with the exclusive contract. Elma suggested they should turn it down, but Mimi immediately disagreed. The company would learn everything about their team, and their relationships would be exposed to the entire universe, a thought that worried Hiro. In this universe, men and women living together on a spaceship were often assumed to be romantically involved, which troubled him. As Hiro pondered, Mimi, completely oblivious to the issue, asked if it was really a problem that the universe would know about their relationship. With an innocent smile, she added that they had nothing to hide, and it was probably too late to worry now, since everyone they'd met already knew. To reassure them further, Sarah also mentioned they'd appear separately on air. After some thought, Hiro realized it didn't actually bother him. While the company had priority media coverage, they couldn't force them to accept any exposure they didn't want. Moreover, Elma seemed fine with this, as long as the company didn't use their voices or images without permission. May agreed too, but on the condition that she would check all data before it was handed over to the company. For May, her duty was to protect her master, and that couldn't be negotiated. So, Sarah reluctantly agreed to May and Elma's additional conditions. However, before finalizing the contract, the team also requested additional weapons for the ship since they would need them to deal with pirates. May specifically asked for medium-caliber laser cannons and small missile launchers to ensure their ship was fully equipped. EML, or electromagnetic guns, or railguns, are different from ray guns. They fire slower and use physical projectiles, making them harder to hit moving targets. But when they do land a shot, their power far exceeds that of lasers. This is a special weapon admired by many, as it can be effectively used by the whole team. Once everything had been discussed, Sarah decided to wrap up the meeting, as she needed to check with her superiors. As soon as Sarah left, Hiro immediately asked Mei if she was really planning to equip the mothership with heavy weaponry from the start. Mei quickly answered yes, as that had always been her intention. While this seemed like a good idea, Elma felt that Mei had overstepped a bit as a servant machine. To Elma, no matter what Mei's goals were, it seemed excessive to provoke her master like that. Mei explained that her existence, her body, and soul were all meant to serve her master, Hiro, and nothing else. She went on to say that the current environment was perfect for her to serve Hiro, and that everyone else was just a servant. However, 98.8% of her innate capabilities were being wasted. At this rate, it would take 1,200 years for Hiro's investment to be worthwhile. That's why she constantly bothered her master, asking for money. Despite this, Hiro felt things were progressing well. This decision would expand their pirate hunting operations and significantly reduce the team's risk of death. Just moments later, Sarah returned, announcing that her superiors had agreed to their terms, and the ship would be delivered in 2 weeks. Before Hiro and the team left, Sarah had one more thing to say. Since the team had agreed to the ship's modifications with her company, she suggested they also allow the company to retrofit their warship while working on the mothership. The team was in the process of buying a mothership, and Sarah thought they should let the company maintain it. Hiro saw this as the perfect opportunity, and immediately asked Sarah how much they would offer, which surprised her, just as he had predicted. It seemed Hiro already knew what the company intended. After all the scans they'd been through, he was well aware that the company had a deep understanding of them. Krishna wasn't an ordinary ship. It would be a goldmine for their engineers. This also meant they wanted to examine Krishna's interior and technology. Realizing what she was up to, Sarah tried to stay calm and insisted that the upgrades would be completely free. However, since Hiro had caught on to what was happening, he declined the offer, stating that they couldn't make a deal. As Hiro prepared to leave, Sarah tried to stop him, almost pleading for him to agree. She even went as far as offering 3 million in weapons and a lot of free ammo. Mei, however, felt that a total value of 20 million NL would be far more reasonable. But that would mean a discount of 11 million from the original price. As Hiro thought it over, he realized Sarah was right on some points. Still, Mei held firm, and when she threatened to leak Krishna's operational data, Sarah immediately agreed to Mei's terms. This took Hiro by surprise, as he hadn't expected Mei to have any data on hand. To ensure she wouldn't do this again, Hiro warned Mei that she would be punished for her actions later. Surprisingly, Mei seemed a little flustered but also oddly pleased by what Hiro said, leaving him puzzled. It appeared that a member of the robot team had a different understanding of punishment, one that brought her strange joy. After the meeting with Sarah, the team continued touring the city. Meanwhile, Mimi suddenly wondered where they would live once Krishna was upgraded. Since Krishna was to be delivered the next day, Elma suggested they stay at a hotel temporarily, as there was still plenty of time. Hiro thought they could head back and find a place while preparing their things. However, when they returned to Krishna's docking area, they were shocked to see the surrounding crowd in complete chaos. It seemed the engineers in the town had rushed to act after hearing rumors about Krishna. They were even fighting with officials trying to stop them from unauthorized scans, which was, of course, illegal. So, they couldn't get in that way. With no other choice, Elma informed everyone that Krishna would be handed over to Edgar the next day, surprising them all. She even mentioned that they had decided to overhaul the ship, so instead of wasting time dealing with the officials, Elma suggested they use that time to sneak into the repair crew. Without wasting a moment, everyone quickly rushed out and headed straight for Space Duergar. The next day, Hiro and his team checked into a luxury hotel. Once there, they were astonished by how extravagant the place was. Mimi felt so out of place standing there that she became uncomfortable, while Hiro also started to feel the pressure. Though, back when he was a mercenary in the game, he hadn't cared much about money, the luxury now felt overwhelming for someone from his humble background. As they considered looking for another hotel, Elma informed them that Sierra cost 10,000 INL per night, while this hotel was only 10,000 INL per week. This meant staying here was far cheaper than at Sierra. Elma also pointed out that it would be much better for a gold-tier mercenary like Hiro to stay in a hotel like this. If he stayed in a cheap one, people might look down on him. What Elma said left Hiro both surprised and suspicious. How did she know so much about these things? Now that Hiro had mentioned it, Elma started to feel uneasy. Before she realized it, she began explaining that, as an elf, she'd experienced more in life than anyone else in the room. Which was why she knew about such things. Before Hiro could ask more, Elma hurriedly suggested they check out their rooms. Upon entering, they were shocked by its vastness. The suite featured a living room, dining area, 4 bedrooms, a large closet, a dressing room, a bathroom, and 2 toilets. After the hotel staff showed them around, Hiro immediately began unpacking. As he prepared to organize his things, Mei pleaded, hoping Hiro would reconsider his punishment. However, it seemed Hiro had made up his mind, wanting Mei to reflect on her actions, especially since she had gone too far this time. Although Mei thought of an alternative punishment, Hiro ultimately asked her not to do anything. Specifically not to serve him beyond her role as a bodyguard. Serving her master was crucial to Mei's existence, and not being allowed to do so was almost unbearable. Hiro explained the method came from Atelier. The android at the reception had told him about it. According to her, people like Mei, young, loyal, and mechanically smart, tended to act recklessly for their masters. So Hiro was shown methods of punishment to make Mei reflect. And indeed, it worked quickly, as Mei now looked anxious, hoping Hiro would let her return to her duties, as she was starting to lose her energy. Elma and Mimi tried to persuade Hiro to let Mei assist him, as she seemed to have reconsidered her actions. In the end, Hiro forgave Mei and allowed her to help him in negotiations. However, this time, Hiro asked Mei not to hide anything, even if it meant sacrificing something. Mei immediately responded with an eager, yes, and began unpacking Hiro's things. She even offered to make tea for him. As they started settling into the hotel, suddenly, Mei's phone rang. After answering, she informed everyone that it was a call from the Krishna repair shop. They wanted Hiro to visit their store. However, Hiro seemed too lazy to go there right now, so he asked Mei to tell them to come to the hotel instead, since he was their customer. But it seemed Mei had already relayed that message. And yet they still insisted Hiro visit in person. Hiro, annoyed, felt frustrated as he had just wanted to relax and enjoy some downtime, especially with Mimi and Elma. But now, with this call from the repair shop, it seemed he'd need to reschedule for another day. Mei suggested they could file a complaint with Sarah from Space Dwerger. But Hiro told her not to bother, as he'd go there himself. He also wanted to take a walk alone. So, he asked Mei to stay at the hotel and watch over Mimi and Elma. After walking for a few minutes, Hiro finally arrived at the repair shop. He was quite surprised by the interior of Krishna. Even more surprising was that the entire shop seemed to be run by dwarves. As soon as the dwarves recognized him, one of the supervisors ordered the workers to hold Hiro back as they rushed towards him. Hiro, extremely confused, didn't know what to do but felt that running away might be his best option. However, before he could escape, 2 dwarf women knocked him to the ground. When he regained consciousness, Hiro immediately asked everyone if this was the shop's idea of courtesy, or just how dwarves treated their customers. Sarah, looking guilty and apologetic, quickly answered that it was not the case. Hiro then demanded to know why they had called him here and restrained him. He had overlooked a lot of rudeness since his arrival, but even someone as calm as him couldn't remain silent in the face of such discourtesy. Sarah began to cry and tried to explain everything. Since Hiro didn't like seeing women cry, he immediately told her to wipe her tears and stop crying. Even though she was an adult, the sight felt wrong to him. And he felt genuinely sorry for Sarah. He said he would allow the repairs at Krishna to continue, but the purchase of the Skid Bladnir would be put on hold. This time, he would decide whether to buy it based on how he was treated, as Sarah had already crossed the line. Sarah had no choice but to accept Hiro's terms. Moreover, although this was a large repair shop, maintaining a mothership still came with considerable costs. Hiro was certain the dwarves would do everything they could to please him. However, before leaving, Hiro decided not to punish the 2 dwarves who had knocked him down himself, but to leave it to Sarah. Partly because he didn't want the hassle, but also because how she handled the situation would influence his assessment of her. Before returning to the hotel, Hiro hoped that this time Sarah and her team would show their gratitude and sincerity towards him. When Hiro returned to the hotel, the girls, especially Mei, couldn't hold back their emotions when they heard what their master had been through. But now, as Hiro mentioned the incident, Mimi began to wonder what the problem was, and why the workshop had called him there. Based on Hiro's account that the dwarves had tried to hold him back, Elma and the others started to consider the possibilities behind their actions. Elma suggested that perhaps they wanted to test Hiro's ship piloting skills. However, Mei was certain that Hiro's ship piloting data had been protected, but that wasn't what Elma was implying. The dwarves had the ability to read metal, meaning they might have noticed the condition of Krishna's jet engines, with thrust and other components operating without protective systems. And perhaps they had detected the wear and tear on the metal. This allowed them to understand how the pilot controlled the ship. Perhaps that was why they wanted to test the pilot. For Hiro, it all depended on the dwarves' attitude. But he doubted they would do anything too harmful. Elma, however, completely disagreed. She pointed out that they were talking about dwarves, famous for following their impulses. Rather than theory, it was instinct. Instead of logic, this meant they might do something crazy. As Hiro began to feel uneasy again, the doorbell at their hotel room suddenly rang, startling everyone. Who could be visiting them at this hour? When they opened the door, Hiro was quite confused by what he saw. It turned out to be the two dwarf women from earlier, Tina and Whiska. It seemed that Sarah had asked them to take care of Hiro tonight as part of their earlier punishment. Now the question was, would Hiro let them have fun with him and add them to his collection of girls, or perhaps he would release them and impose a more fitting punishment? Let's see what happens next.